So today's video is all about changing your oil, and we will go from draining the old oil out of your car to removing your oil filter, then adding the new oil to your engine in a step-by-step process. The first step will be to warm the car up to ensure the oil is nice and warm and ready to be drained. This just makes it easier to come out and a little bit more unpleasant if you get it on your hands, so use gloves. This vehicle is already warm, and next you're going to need an oil catch can for the oil to drain into. Or in this case we have a tank, as we're lucky enough to have the car on a lift, but it can be done in your driveway with less space. This is exactly why you need gloves, as just from handling the tank my hands are full of oil. Next, you're going to want to reach for the correct size spanner or socket for your sump plug. Get it on there and then get it loose. In my case, mine had been previously over tightened by somebody else, so my dad had to step in. Now, once it's loose, you can do the rest by hand, as it will be too loose to really get anything substantial with the tool. And some people tend to pull the plug away as fast as they can so that they don't get oil on their hands. That's not the proper way to do it, because otherwise the oil can overshoot the catch can, which causes a big mess. So this is why you use gloves, and then you're not afraid to get the oil on your hands. Also important to make sure that you don't drop the sump plug in the can or tank, as it will be difficult to fish out afterward and you get your hands even more covered in oil. And you'll know that the engine is almost fully drained once you can see it dripping slowly like this. It takes typically under a minute depending on the capacity of the engine. You take your new sump plug and thread it in by hand, and once it's hand tight, just snug by hand, you can't tighten it anymore. We're going to take a same spanner that we used earlier and just nip it by hand, not too tight, otherwise you have the same issue that I had taking it off. Now we can move our catch can forward to the front of the engine, below the oil filter, depending on where your oil filter is located. In my car, it's located on the side of the engine block, just there. And you should also notice that there is sort of a bolt head on the end of the oil filter, and this is used when taking it off. You get a spanner or a ratchet just over that head, and the filter just comes off like so. You will start seeing oil dripping out once it's loose enough, and this is not cause for concern. This is normal, as the filter will contain a small amount of oil, which is why later on we actually overfill the engine by a small amount to compensate for the oil filter, which is then later filled by the engine. You can just drop the old oil filter down into the catch can, and now it's ready to receive its new oil filter. So when replacing parts on a vehicle, it's always best to use original parts. So in my case, it's from VAG. This ensures high quality, original quality, and ensures that it will fit the vehicle 100%. If an original part is not available, you can use any reputable brand and it should be fine. You'll notice on the O-ring of the new oil filter that it's quite dry. So this can be a leaking point. Oil can seep past there. So you just get a small amount of oil on the tip of your finger and run it around the edge to ensure a nice seal when you put the oil filter back on the car. Now, it should have a thread off the side of the engine that the oil filter will just thread onto to make your life a lot easier when you're putting the oil filter back on. And you should just be able to tighten this by hand and give it a final tighten, the same as the sump plug, just snug by hand. You don't need too much strength to do this. So, as you can see, that's the new oil filter fitted. Now, as the oil filter is fitted, we now need to put new oil in the engine before starting it up. In this case, we have a little bit extra oil than what we need. You need to make sure it's the correct quantity of oil for your engine. And you also need to make sure that it's the right specification of oil for your engine. When pouring the oil, it's important to make sure you don't spill anything anywhere, as this just creates a mess that you have to clean up, and it could potentially waste some oil and you end up not filling your engine far enough. So that was just a compressed version. It takes a lot longer to fill the oil. Now we can check the oil level to make sure that we filled it to the correct points. So as I mentioned earlier, we're overfilling the engine to compensate for the oil filter. So it will show overfilled on the dipstick. Once we start the engine and let it run, we will check the oil again after letting the oil run and having it warm up. So now the engine is nice and warm, and we can check the oil once again. And as you can see, it's filled just below the maximum line, which is where you should be. I hope you found that video both helpful and entertaining. In the next video, we will be covering how to change your air filter and your spark plugs. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.